Hi, this is Liqian Ren, Director of Modern Alpha Wisdom Tree ETFs. Welcome to China of Tomorrow podcast series, where we navigate China, India, Japan, and the broader emerging markets with members of Wisdom Tree and other industry leaders. Hi, today is April 29th, 2025, and this episode will be released on May 1st, 2025. It's amazing. 1/3 of the year has passed for 2025. Obviously, I think people are going to look back. This is really a crucial year between US-China relationship. A lot of things happening. I give a shout this morning on Twitter in terms of, what people want to hear, honestly, because this whole year is going to be leading with trade war, and I just wonder what other topics people are interested in. So I'll give a quick commentary, and then in the future, also we usually record on Mondays. So if you're interested, feel free to read us topics of your interest. I think the trade war about 20 days ago, I think 3 weeks ago, I kind of mentioned that US-China will have a trade deal. I think at that time, people were very pessimistic that, US-China is going all the way 145% tariff. But now it's becoming clear that US-China realized that in the end, they don't have a deal. But I think sometimes market probably get a little bit ahead of itself as well. At that time, even I give like end of year as a potential like a time, but I think the deal is likely gonna stretch out much longer. Now, the market is very, very confident of a deal. I feel the market's getting a little bit ahead of itself in terms of US-China trade deal. In terms of what's going on in trade deal, I think many people are going to realize that in the US side, many of the things price will increase, while in Chinese side, many of the things price will decrease. An interesting thing I observe is that Temu and Amazon, they're likely going to put the tariff charges in there, and then Temu is even more prominent. For goods that cost $30, there's likely $34 of import charge, which is the tariff charge. So I tested myself. It does show about the proportionality that way, and I think Amazon is also going to show that, and people are going to realize that it does have consequences. For China's side, it also have consequences. Now a lot of goods that's usually shipped for US market is now, in China market, and many manufacturers and stores are giving about 20% discounts. So again, obviously people will say, why suffer for both sides? And that really brings to this question, what is this tariff war is about? It's really, or the trade war is about. It's really not really trade war. I think fundamentally it is between the largest economy and the second largest economy, and both vying for economic power, leading technology competition, and all the other kinds of powers that comes with economic power, right? Who has a say in national security, regional security in Asia. So trade war is really a reflection of these two countries' competition in many different areas. So I think that is really what this war is about. That is why both sides will go through this. And I think a lot of people are going to, I wouldn't suffer, not necessarily, but a lot of people are going to be impacted. I think almost everybody, directly and most likely indirectly. I'll give you an example. For a goods that's made in China, China's profit margin is actually pretty low. So a significant part of that profit margin is earned by American companies. And then now they're going to have to either raise prices for individuals, and also cut into the profitability of these companies. So I think, jobs will be lost. A lot of people who relies on China exclusively for production is going to really get pinched business-wise. But both sides is very much still going to go ahead, and mainly because this is also a test of each side's economic resilience. In the future, when U.S.-China have different conflicts, it will use this to show that, whether it has, and it's also testing each side's resiliency. So, for example, U.S. is quietly giving exemptions to car parts and computers, phones, while China's side is also giving exemptions on semiconductor chips, some of the, I think, biology equipment. So both sides, even though they're talking tough, but both sides are also quietly giving exemption for the critical industries. So how this is going to play out at first, I think it's good for and for our listeners who've listened to us. I think we've always said this is going to be very long term. It's going to last 5, 10, decades could be, at least five years, I think. So if not trade war, now these are, I would say it's more like a trade battles. So this battle likely will end, end of next year, but then another front can open, so, and trade is one big part of US-China relationship. So I feel even the first, battle kind of may end, and then people get, battle fatigue. Um, After, next year, the other competition areas will open up. The most important one is obviously the technology competition. So in terms of investing, I think for China, um, I mean, it's already, I think, shown that it has resiliency, and it probably will make sense to have some China equity in your portfolio. Now, how do you do it? You can have, it really depends on your risk budget. You can invest in the emerging market portfolio where China is about 30%, depends on how you construct a portfolio. Some of the high dividend weighted portfolios may have lower China weight. Or you could have active play, having combining emerging markets like China portfolio with China portfolio. That's up to your choice. We also have multi-factor strategy where the China weight is underweighting. So we have about 10%, 10 to 15, depends on the time. It is to reduce the portfolio's risk, as China investing could be potentially high risk with all these trade wars. So a couple other things people are interested here. I got a question about China's housing market. I think there's really not much going on. It's the government will do something if things got really, really bad, but the pain of that really, really bad is actually pretty high, the threshold. So the government is unlikely to do substantial pop-up of the housing market. A lot of things are going to come out of the local market, local government. So local government right now, for example, is promising that kids can go to local school if you buy houses, which in the older days a typical Chinese household cannot do that. And I have personal experience because I grew up as a rural person. You cannot go to the city's school just because you live there. You have to have this so-called papers. Another thing which I think very interesting going on in China that U.S. media probably is not paying much attention is that this very two top consumer tech company, JD and Meituan. For disclosure, these are companies that probably in most of the China portfolios, unless it's China Asia is targeted. They are in these very public fights on the food delivery business, which was dominated by Meituan, and JD's CEO. He goes as a delivery worker, and does delivery. And in China, these kind of fights can be very personal. So you see the fight of water, drinking water, guys, between Wahaha and Nongfu spring waters. And then you have Pinduoduo, which is PDD, the Tmu's parent company, versus Baba over, Baba has this Taobao similar to Amazon. And then Pinduoduo is like Temu, they have a much lower cost. And then in the EV guys, you have these CEOs of Xiaomi who goes on social media and does a huge amount of promotion for his own company. So these kind of public fights between companies is also very personal, very almost entertaining, which I think very interesting for this time of the period in China. Now, someone told me that this might be the case 30 years ago in the US or 50 years ago. I don't know. Maybe Pepsi and Coke had. I haven't read enough books, and if you have anything interesting, I'll definitely look it up. But again, that is a very top line local news. China's economy, I think, is still similar to what our assessment is. Still macro wise, it's still very, I would say, chugging along. It's the unemployment situation, the consumption. The government is trying to do some of it, but it's not using significant. And there's a joke that the PBOC keeps saying that we'll lower interest rate at the appropriate time, like 10 times already. The same word, appropriate time. So again, I think this is what the US China are going to go through with it, and then we are almost like on the plane, and then it's going to be a bumpy ride, and then everybody put the seatbelt if trying to piece and then rise through, and how it goes. I think after 2 years, US China will go back and reassess and then pick another battle. So we'll see how this goes. But for now, both US and China, I think last week there was some talk about US is likely to move back some of the tariffs, and then Treasury Secretary Benson mentioned it, and then President Trump ruled it out. So I think on the China side, it's very local, very strong wording on China not yielding to the US. In some way, it's totally understandable. One last thing is about this entertaining. I wouldn't say entertaining, but US says President Xi and President Trump had a call, and China vehemently denied there was a call. And there was so much ink spilled whether there's a call or not. And I think the better assessment is that both of these is actually language for internal, domestic, and also for other countries. So US wants to give this idea that China is already yielding. We are already talking about a deal with China, and the rest of countries, go ahead and make a deal with us. China is kind of sending the message like, no, we are not talking. If you go ahead and make a deal with the US, you're gonna, you won't get a good deal. So this is really, I would say it's a message, not necessarily for US and China specifically, but for the other countries which are in the middle, between hard and rock place. It's difficult for those countries to make a deal. I know that US likely make a deal with India first. I think for that deal, when the details will announce, I think people will become a little bit disappointed, because India ranks tense with trading with the US, and its trade with US is really tiny, so it's really not that consequential a deal. For US to show it has bargaining power, it really need to make a deal with the top 5 trading partners, which is like Japan, EU, those places. So anyway, thank you for listening, and we hope to talk more and bring topics of interesting to you when you are thinking about China. Thanks.